So today is more so kind of really looking into me, especially in my younger days, and how I kind of thought about my future as I was growing up. And I think the person you see today, like me right now, I'm a lot more open and confident and capable compared to a few years ago. And I think that has to do with obviously growing up, but also I've seen a lot of things that I think would be really helpful for me to share today, which is why I'm really grateful for San, Jackie, Jason, and everyone who has really been involved with this workshop. So, to give you a bit of an outline as to what we're going to be talking about, first, I'll give you some context as to who I am. Obviously, hearing someone's bio is very nice and kind of flashy with my CV, but being able to know my personal background and understand some of the reasons why I am the way I am can kind of also showcase, the thought process behind it, and you could also reflect on your own past and see how that can push you to your future. So, in terms of that, I'll also talk about some things that I've done, some initiatives. I'll expand on it. Feel free to ask any questions you have. Genuinely, I'm very open about my experiences because back when I was younger, well, I'm still young, but back when I was younger, I really wished I had someone to really share those really deep and personal advice, because you get a lot of general advice like, oh, don't be shy, blah, blah, blah. But, it's not the same as something that's very true. And then finally, I want to share my overarching vision as to my entire life. What do I want to do with it? How I kind of value things, what I think about different concepts. And then finally, some unique perspectives that I have that I think more people should actually adopt. But, obviously that's all very, very opinion based. So first thing, personal and professional background. Let's start with professional because everyone usually introduces themselves that way. But on the surface, I am a fourth year student now, as Jason alluded to. I'm a fourth year student in McMaster for health sciences. And yes, it was a very competitive environment in the beginning, but now it's really chill, I hope. And then in terms of employment, I have always been very active because financially, I'm not super lucky sometimes because my parents, immigrant parents, you grow up and you see how much work and effort they put in. So I'm not very lucky because I know so many people in the health science program and so many, pre-med students who have parents that are doctors, but I'm not that type of person. I think it's kind of luck, but it's also lucky that I don't, because I get to really work hard for myself and experience a lot more, I think. But with that being said, I have been working since I was in grade 9, trying to save up as much money as I can for medical school tuition, for life. So some of my recent jobs I've done was I was at the McMaster Health Forum for the past 2 years. And essentially that was to work in health policy. So that is specifically more with the government and just really helping them look at COVID-19 related issues. And currently, I actually will be joining 2 new nice jobs. One of them is the Antarctica Institute of Canada. I'll be managing a really large budget, $1 million for this program to help youths with research. And to give you some examples, we have a lot of publications coming out, the printing books. One that I recently worked on was fetal alcohol syndrome. So there's all sorts of different research articles coming from the Antarctic Institute of Canada. So I'll be the program director for that soon. And then I will also be the clinical vendor for the Daniel Feingold self-determination program. That's in West Los Angeles. I'm very fortunate that this will also be remote. So, very flexible time zones. They have their own time zones, but I'll also be working with psychologists and all sorts of different people. The best part, I think, about both of those jobs is that they are very much not minimum wage, which is great. So that way I could get ahead in med school if I, continue those jobs for those 2 years. So that's kind of my education and employment. And my aspirations, in case you couldn't tell by the health science at McMaster, is to become a doctor. So I think that's kind of a really quick rundown as to my professional background, who I am as a person. But I think the personal background is something that not anyone really mentions. And I think that's so important to know. So my personal background is I'm Chinese. My parents are both immigrants. They came here in, I think, the 2000s. And it was not easy for them. When they actually first came to Canada, they were in the poorest the poorest place in Toronto. It was really awful. And I still remember it to this day because I remember the smell of the apartment, those, not to get too graphic here, but the cockroaches, the bed bugs, the mice. We would look at the hotel lobby cameras, like videos as our entertainment. It was really sad because when you're an immigrant and when you're, starting off from scratch, essentially, it's a very hard life. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. And especially in younger generations, sometimes it's easy to forget how much your family has come from, right? So I think that's something that is very personal to me, and it's a background that I'm always very proud of, even though it was a very humble start, but it's something that really inspired me to be a hard worker because I saw my parents and I saw how much they've come from. Now we're obviously in a much better place, middle class, that's much better, but being able to have that as my personal background, I'm very proud that my parents are such hard workers, and they've shown me that you can also be a hard worker, even if you have a lot of disadvantages, even if you have setbacks that are harder than maybe some of your peers. They kind of showed me that you can make opportunities for yourself. And besides that, if you work hard, every challenge is very temporary. Just keep doing good things and it's inevitable for you to succeed in some way. So I think that's something more personal about me that really speaks to my background in several dimensions, in the way of why I really am so outgoing in that sense, but also because I just think it's very important for younger people to remember and try to take time to think about the good things they do have, because it's hard. There's a lot of things in this world that's distracting, right? With that being said, I like to talk about the more exciting bits, my initiatives. So whenever I talk about these things, I do want to give a disclaimer. Talking about my initiatives tends to intimidate a lot of younger people because they find it very overwhelming. They see so many things happening, and it's hard to process that all of these initiatives had taken me years to build, right? It's not an overnight thing at all. In fact, being able to do a lot of these things honestly took a lot of courage. I, as a younger person, when I was in maybe grade 3 or something, or even in grade 9, I've always been very soft-spoken. I'm very quiet. I stuttered when I talked to people. I was so shy. I was so embarrassingly shy. But with time, I didn't want to be that person anymore because I realized I'm missing so much in life. So that's kind of some things that have been going on. And I'll start with my most recent one to give you an insight as to me as a 4th year now, and gradually go back in time so you can see what the whole timeline was. So the Felicity app is something I've started, and Jason also alluded to this when he introduced me, but essentially it's a productivity app for young adults to work on their work life. So, as many of you guys know, the pandemic has been rough. I know it has been, and I'm very proud of all of you guys for overcoming it. But social distancing is not easy for a lot of people. As I said, I'm someone who is very shy, and even now, I still kind of am like that, but I have grown that confidence to do other things. But regardless, to me, I actually enjoyed the pandemic because I like being with my family, and I don't really like talking to people that much. So I know that I personally wasn't that affected in a productivity way, but so many of my classmates have been affected, and I know a lot of you guys must have been too. When you're at home, it's very difficult to study. It's very difficult to be concentrating. It's hard to have that ambition. So I noticed that, and in July 2020, so wow, almost 2 years ago, more than 2 years ago, I started this app. And I think it was very difficult for me because I have no idea about anything related to tech. I don't know how to code. I've never done UI UX, like user interface. I've never done anything like that. So this is an app project that was really scary to me because I didn't know what I was doing. And I actually started with only 4 people, and we would go on Messenger and have these calls, and it was just so awkward and, very intimidating in general. But gradually, within these past 2 years, I've actually grown to manage 164 people across the world. And I also get to talk to different professors and all sorts of cool people. If you guys are big into psychology, Ellen Langer from Harvard, I've talked to her while she was walking her dog, and she's been giving me advice and stuff. So a lot of those cool things have started because of Felicity. So to tell you more about it, you could take a look at the website if you want on your own time as well. But the whole point of it is to essentially use psychology research and then make it into something that is presentable, animated, and very fun, so that you as a person can focus on your own problems that are preventing you from being as productive as you can. So these are some of the pictures to give you a better insight. On the left, you can see 3 phone screens, and these are the most basic levels. The most basic levels are essentially, the calendar. On the calendar, you could also do your check lists, and then they also have a Pomodoro timer. So for those who don't know, you time yourself for 25 minutes so that you focus on one task. No distraction, no TikTok, no Instagram. You focus for that 20 minutes, and then you get 5 minutes of break. You get to do whatever you want, go crazy on your phone, all that. And then afterwards, you again start doing chores. And essentially, this is the most basic level because you have the calendar, the to-do list, the timer, all integrated into one app. This is very standard. All phones have these, but to have it so seamlessly integrated is actually a very big difference in your daily work routine. Now, on the right, you can see there's 4 characters. Now, these characters are, in psychology, there's a theory called gamification, which essentially means that you're making a normal, boring concept into something that's more fun. It's more like a game. So these are the characters we made. For example, the little fire guy. The fire guy represents procrastination. You feel like you're on fire, you have no control over your life, it's overtaking everything. But instead, we make them kind of cute, very simple, and they will work with you on different exercises to help you improve on certain areas. So there's 4 characters, but in reality, this app actually has 5 domains. So we have procrastination, motivation, learning strategies, well-being, and positive psychology. So that's psychological capital, like hope, resilience, etc. A lot of domain, a lot of wiggle space, because productivity is so subjective, right? I might be someone who, let's say I'm not that motivated, but I don't procrastinate. Whereas someone else might not be taking care of themselves, and that's preventing their work life. So these things all depend on the person. And because of that, you have to be the one who decides what you want to work on. So that's kind of what Felicity is all about. Okay. So here, I've given you a quick example, but I started doing research within the app, and because I manage 164 people, I'm not the one who always does every single step because I manage people. But this is just to give you an example of a systematic review that we've performed. And actually, because of our research, we've been invited to Alberta this summer. And with Felicity, the strange thing is I've never seen these people before. I manage so many people, but I've never seen them before. And then I told them, we got invited for this symposium in Alberta. Do you guys want to come? And then 11 of us just, took a plane and we met in Alberta, which was crazy because we didn't know each other. We knew nothing about each other, and we had the most fun time ever. We were on 2 hours of sleep. We presented all our research, and we were the only undergraduates there because everyone else was a doctor or a professor. It was a very cool experience. But this is kind of to show you, I was in second year when I started this. I didn't know how to do systematic reviews, but what matters is that I had that perseverance to continue doing it because it was really scary, even for me, because I don't know what I'm doing, right? But when you make a team, you know how to manage people, you have faith in yourself, and you constantly look at how to get better, you will be able to achieve anything. And this is kind of my own testimony because I used to be kind of skeptical about this. I see so many people do well and I don't understand how. Well, it's kind of simple, but just do it. That's kind of what I've learned. Obviously, there's a lot of steps along the way. You meet a lot of people, you learn a lot from them. But, something like this that was a little complicated at first became very manageable. So in the future, with Felicity, now we have a prototype being developed, and right now, actually, very exciting news, I'm running 2 clinical studies with a doctor, and we're actually going to be using Felicity on around 10 to 15 patients with blood diseases, so hematology. So long story short, we'll be conducting actual research studies on them and, looking at their behavior and all of that. So that's really exciting. I think we've come such a long way, and I'm really, really proud of everyone in the team. And then another part of it is we'll continue building the prototype and getting user feedback. So that's kind of the future for Felicity. When I started Felicity, I thought it would only be like 6 months. And now it's been way more than 6 months, like 2 years. And I have a feeling this might actually continue for more than 2 years, because next I'm talking about Stream. And Stream is a federal charity that I started when I was in grade 12. And that's 4 years ago. I did not expect Stream to be 4 years long. And the thing with Stream is that I started this in my midterms when I was in grade 12, which was crazy because universities care a lot about midterms. They care about your GPA. But this is actually the most impactful experience, I think, of my entire life. And honestly, this is why I'm here. This is why I actually know Eddie. I know OneHub because of Stream. When I was in grade 12, like I said before, in high school, I was a very shy person, and I still kind of have that a little bit. But a big part of me saw a lot of people doing cool things that I always wanted to do, and I realized I should do it. I should do it. Why not, right? So I started with Stream, and Stream essentially is a charity that helps promote educational accessibility. To give you some examples, we host a lot of events, we do all sorts of conferences, workshops, and I get to meet with a lot of younger people and really guide them even in their career a little bit. So that's kind of what this initiative was all about. Even now, we have an online community platform on Facebook. It's called Student Opportunity Platform. I believe it has 10.5 thousand members on it right now, and we post opportunities all the time. So that's something that we are also doing. And you can see on the right, sorry, I'm a little sick. You can see me on the right getting a medal from the lieutenant governor. So you see the lady with the white hair next to the piano? That's her. She's the lieutenant governor of Ontario, and she was really wonderful. And she was presenting this award because of some of the things I've done for Stream. And on that note, actually, I never expected Stream to grow into anything specific, because it was more a project because I wanted to do something for the community. I always wanted to do something like that because I've seen people do it. And especially like my personal background, I know how important education is. My immigrant parents have always told me, because, that's kind of how you really make a career out there. You pull yourself into financial freedom. And I learned a lot of that from them. So with that being said, Stream eventually grew into a big thing, and Jason kind of listed off a few of those accolades that I did receive. I got to meet Prince Harry on Zoom, obviously. Everything is through Zoom because of the pandemic. But Prince Harry, what else? Oh, Queen Elizabeth's secretary, Commonwealth Secretariat. Oh man, this was right before she passed too. And also the Duke of Edinburgh, also right before he passed. Oh, geez. But, a lot of cool accolades. The federal government gave us $7.8 thousand for a 2-day festival. And that was maybe a few months ago. Yeah, lots of cool things. Again, how I started this was by myself. And I remember my dad driving me everywhere, and it was really embarrassing because I didn't know what I was doing. And I even pulled my best friend to do this with me. She dropped out within a month, but it was something that I started, and it was really scary, but I'm so glad I did. And you can see here on the left is our very first meeting ever. Very first meeting. And, it's kind of silly now that I think about it, that I was in grade 12 forcing everyone to wear suits and show up at a random office to take pictures just so I could get something on my website because I had nothing. It was a really hard start, but I think that it really changed a lot of my life, right? And on the right, you can see these are the groups of people that I now manage at Felicity. Obviously, it's not 164 of them, but it's a good bunch. But, during that first meeting, I was shaking. The way I was talking, it was honestly very embarrassing now that I think about it. But it was difficult for me to even openly speak to maybe like 10 people. But now, obviously, I had another research startup where I taught 500 people on Zoom for 2 hours every week. And I didn't flinch. I felt nothing. So I've come a long way because of that. And I think these initiatives are very important. And here you can see gradually we changed offices. We even went to different exhibits. You can see there, that's in Richmond Hill. Those are my 2 mini CEOs. And then on the bottom is us getting bigger and bigger and having more meetings. But here on the left is us at OneHub during the summer. And on the right, I was at Brampton giving another workshop talking about the importance of education. But this whole charity really kickstarted for a very long time. And though right now I'm not the most active in it because university has taken a lot of time, I think a very big problem that a lot of younger people face when they start initiatives is that they don't keep it up. A lot of people in high school can start a lot of nonprofits, and they do it not because they actually like it, but because they want it for their resume, because they want it for university. And there's nothing wrong with that. But once you get into university, they drop it because life gets hard. And I think that's one thing that I'm really glad about. I never dropped a lot of my projects, and I was always able to maintain it. And how you maintain it is not you do everything, or else you cannot possibly maintain it. What you have to do is you have to learn to trust other people. You have to train people. You have to talk to people. You have to rely on other people to walk far, right? That's something I really learned with Stream. I learned to work with people a lot better. And I think it's really difficult when you're young to work with people that you don't know, to do things you don't know, and to be young, inexperienced, because it's just very scary. But really, there is nothing for you to lose if you think about it. It's just embarrassing for 2 seconds. And then what? And then you learn and nothing happens, right? So I think that's my biggest takeaway for that one. And then over the summer, I did a few fun things, still productive projects, but I started a podcast. And this podcast was really fun, I think. It was genuinely just interesting. I talked to, for example, Stephanie Mears. So she's a millionaire in Beverly Hills. She started homeless. Her parents were drug addicted on the streets. She had a very rough childhood, but she became very strong, and eventually she's rich in Beverly Hills. I don't know what to tell you, I was able to talk to a lot of people, and in this podcast, it's specifically about careers. I talk to people with different backgrounds to learn about their life, their experiences, ask them for advice. And the reason I started this was because I felt not lost, but I just felt that I wanted to know more about life, because being able to run my own initiatives is different from talking to older people who have more different life paths. So when you look at how large the world is, you'll be able to feel less scared about your own life. You'll also be able to know that there's so much out there that you could try. And then on the bottom, Alexandra, she went to Milan. She actually took pictures of Bella Hadid. She's a photographer. Vanessa, she's in Arizona. She is a Forbes author, Forbes, Forbes 30 under 30. So she's a special author for them. And then on the right, Eve, a sweetheart, she is a life model. And if you guys don't know what that is, it's basically posing naked professionally for artists. So all sorts of different people, right? And these people are everywhere. Like Alexander, where was he? He was in North Carolina. And Alexander is in North Carolina. Alexandra, she's in Italy. And Eve is in England. I've talked to people across the world through this podcast, and it was really interesting. And now it's on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, all sorts of fun stuff. I always put links for all my initiatives if you want to take a look. But I think it's really fun. And this is essentially what I did during the pandemic summer while I was also doing the Felicity app. I think it's just very enriching. And to me, it's kind of like a hobby to do so many projects. Okay, cool. And then this year, I also tried a different project. So the podcast, I let go of temporarily because I was really tired of talking to people. Not gonna lie, when you manage 164 people and you constantly interview people, it gets kind of tiring. And I'm not really extroverted either, so it's just a little draining at that point. So I put pause, but I'll come back to the podcast. I know I will. But in the meantime, I also took more time to explore my own creative freedom element. This is more of a quieter hobby, less talking, but I traveled everywhere with my dad. So we went to Texas. On the left, you can see that's Texas. In the middle, that's where is that? Toronto, I think. And then this is also in Toronto. I started in Toronto because that's where I live, right? And then afterwards, I went to LA, Los Angeles. That's actually how I landed my job. And then here, also in Canada, on the right, again, LA. And because I went traveling everywhere and I took so many pictures, I got another opportunity. And I'm actually going to Los Angeles maybe in a month because they opened a new luxury hotel in downtown Hilton Hotels. So Hilton Hotels opened a new luxury hotel, and they asked me to go take pictures for them, actually, and they're paying me and all that, so that's really fun. But travels is another type of adventure, and again, very scary, right? You're going out there, you don't know what's going to happen. What if a plane crashes? There's so many different things, and it's really embarrassing sometimes to post pictures of yourself on social media, but who cares? Who cares? It's your life. You want to experience things. So that's kind of something I've been trying. Okay, now we're approaching the end towards a lot of my initiatives. I have actually quite a few other ones, but I think these would be more relevant to you guys. But on another level, remember how I'm doing medicine in the future, hopefully. So obviously, I also have to do things that are very specific in my career. I love exploring everything, including my academics, right? So this is something interesting. That's Albert Einstein's brain. And only 3 labs in the entire world has Albert Einstein's brain, which I find is so interesting. And I'm actually really grateful and lucky and honored that I'm working with Albert Einstein's literal brain. You can see that's my professor. Her name is Dr. Whittleson. And she was allocated a chunk of his brain. And right now I'm actually writing a paper, and that's me at the bottom, looking through a microscope. I needed to put a slide there first before I looked into it, but I was posing for the picture. But long story short, now I'm using that crazy high-tech microscope to look at slides of his brain, because we're looking at differences of his anatomy compared to like 30 normal anatomy brains. So Dr. Whittleson has, as you can see, different shelves and jars of different brains. It could be creepy if you're not into this, but it could be interesting if you are. So yeah, we've noticed that Einstein just doesn't have the parietal operculum. So instead, he has a little like Sylvian fissure meeting up with a post-central sulcus. Anyways, nerdy, right? But we've noticed quite a few anatomical differences, and we're looking into why that makes him think differently and why he might have been such a wonderful mathematician and physicist. So yeah, that's something I'm doing. And obviously, I've really been simplifying it for you guys, but it takes a lot of time. And as you can tell, all of these projects take a lot of time. And I gave you the disclaimer before, but I spent a lot of time doing work, and the work that I've started doing, they're not very fun until you get better at it, right? So when you start everything, it all feels kind of painful at first, but with time, as you understand yourself better, as you achieve more, as people recognize what you're doing, then it starts getting easier. But I think the hard parts can actually be the fun parts, because you get to learn about your own problems, your own weaknesses, and really improve as a person. So with that being said, I do want to kind of talk about my values as a person. And I think a lot of younger people first need to reflect on themselves before they start anything, because starting these things is easy, but you have to start like being grounded in your purpose. Why are you doing this, And that's something that I've frequently asked myself. Why am I constantly doing these projects? What is the goal? What am I trying to do? Sometimes it's good to not have any purpose. You can just freely explore yourself. But at the end of the day, you do have to constantly reevaluate yourself and change yourself and adjust. Are you happy with what you're doing? If you're not happy, is it something that's just because you're discouraged or, So as a result of all these years of just doing random things, I really boiled down my 3 values. I think the first one, especially when it comes to just life in general, is authenticity. And I think authenticity is it's a little weird of a value, because to me, I think it just means being true to yourself, right? And it's very hard when you have social media, or when you're constantly surrounded by people, or you're just constantly doing things for others. You kind of lose a side of yourself. You don't understand why you're doing the things you're doing anymore. So being authentic, being real, being true to yourself, and being kind of honest is what's important, because it could hurt to be honest, but when you really mean it, when you really mean to do something, you'll find that it's easy to carry these things for a long time. That's why I've been working on Stream, Felicity, all of these things for so long, for years. I've only lived 20 years, guys. And Felicity has been, a fifth of my life? Not Felicity, sorry, Stream, a fifth of my life. And Felicity was 2 years, so that's a tenth of my life. You know, it's hard for you to continue things unless if you actually authentically enjoy them and authentically you see value in them. Second thing, open-mindedness, especially when you're young. You have to experience things because I think there's so much out there in the world and you have no idea. You don't have that perspective at all. And it's very easy to get comfortable and just settle. But I think being open-minded and embracing your own weaknesses is really important because that allows you to actually explore what's out there in the world. And another thing is unique views. Sometimes it's very easy to reject other people's ideas because sometimes you don't get it, right? And also sometimes it doesn't seem like it makes sense. But you have to try to be open, try to see where they're coming from. Why do they think that way? What is it that made them the way they are? And then once you start seeing that, you begin realizing, wow, there is so much for me to learn. And once you begin learning that, you become a much better and more dimensional person as well. So I think open-mindedness is so important. It really is. All my friends have a sense of open-mindedness to them, but I find the successful ones are always the ones who are just taking life as it is, right? The people who are like a little shy, they're like, I can't do that. What if other people laugh at me? That's a type of closed-mindedness, and it does actually prevent you from living your fullest life. And I recommend, it's easy to say to be open-minded, but small steps will take you a long way. Finally, long-term view. I think another thing is, again, I kind of mentioned this before, but it's really easy to see the short-term things. For example, with traveling, or honestly with anything. With traveling, that was something that was a bit of a struggle for me because I was spending money to get on planes to travel just to take pictures and explore the world. Seems a little strange, but you think about it and you look at the long-term view and you think, for the next few years, compared to this maybe $200 ticket, is it going to be worth it? Yes, because it makes a very big imprint on my life. And now, who knew? Because of this, I met some cool plastic surgeons in Beverly Hills. I now have a clinical vendor job from LA that's remote also. Just different interesting things. You don't know what can happen, but allowing yourself to be open-minded, having that long-term view of that purpose, all of these things will combine and push you forward to a brighter future. And finally, vision. So I think vision is something that's very important. And let me give you an example. I'll give you two. These are pictures of random people. So Victor and Jin, these are actually two of my closest mentees, people I've mentored, and they were both actually Stream Syndicate CEOs at one point. As I mentioned, it's very difficult for me to run so many projects if I do everything myself. So I learned to rely on other people. Let me give you an example. Victor, so he was actually one of the most original people that started with Stream. He started it as soon as I started Stream, basically. So he was one of the very first. He saw us at our worst. And back then, I was in grade 12, he was in grade 10. And the reason why I saw a lot of potential in Victor, sounds strange, but he actually applied to be the designer for us. Back when we had nobody for the nonprofit. He applied to be the designer, but he made a whole little Wix website, and the website was honestly kind of really bad. It looked ugly. It was pretty bad. But I saw something in him because I see potential. When you actually put in that effort to even make a website for a designer position, that's something. And you do not let that go, Other people, I remember telling this to someone else and they were like, that's not really a big deal. It's not, but who else did that, right? So when I talk about vision, what I mean is being able to see the value in something, but also being able to pick and choose. And because I saw that in Victor, I was able to talk to him and, really help develop him as well, because I am older than him and I am mentoring him and all that. And, gradually he also became someone who was very open and outgoing. Now he's at Western. I think he wants to do med school. I put question mark because obviously things change for people, who knows? But, he's come a long way. So when I say vision, I mean someone like Victor who saw that putting in a lot of effort will get you a long way. That's something that is really helpful. Jin is also someone I met a year later, and she was also a CEO at one point for Stream, helping me run everything. Now she, back then, in July, I think 2019, we had a Canada Day workshop at Halton Hills. Halton Hills was like 3 hours away from Toronto. 3 hours, 2 hours? I forgot. It's a far commute. We were there for only a day for our Canada Day thing, and it wasn't even that fancy. But she drove 2 hours to get there just to sign up for a shift, to volunteer for a shift. She didn't need volunteer hours. She didn't need anything. But she did it anyways because she kind of saw Stream's potential as well. And I think, to me, it's kind of flattering because it shows me that they also see the potential in me, because Stream is a reflection of what I'm doing, right? But another example is, that's kind of an example of vision. She had a vision that Stream was something good, and I had a vision of her. I see that she has potential. She has that endurance. She put in that effort, you know? So what am I trying to say? Vision is important because you have to be able to see what value there is, and most importantly, you have to be willing to put in the effort to get that value. Now she's at Stanford. Oh, maybe she's at Princeton, but she's in one of the Ivy Leagues right now. She's aiming for med school too. And I actually talked to her before, and she told me years later, she was like, oh, Joy, like back when you were doing Stream, I was honestly really like amazed that you were renting an office and all that. Behind the scenes though, I was shocked because I felt so scared to do these things. I was shaking. But she thought that I was very strong-minded. She thought I was very cool, whatever. And you know, sometimes when I think about it, when I'm kind of weak and vulnerable and sad about life or something, it does bring me like some tears in my eyes because I think, wow, it's been a really hard time sometimes, but being able to have that impact on people is really so fulfilling, and it really does drive me for such a long time. So I think that's something that I want to share with you guys, because I think the small things can tell you a lot about a person, but what's most important is that you also have to put in that effort to make sure those small things become bigger things, right? Okay, last point before we get to questions is unique perspectives. I have 3 opinions, I think, that are a little controversial, but depends, right? First is, who cares? Who cares? And I think this is controversial because obviously you should care a little bit, but I've noticed a lot of younger people let a stranger's opinions have more control over your entire life than you, right? That was me. Everyone is like that. Sometimes even asking for extra napkins or something, you might not want to ask them because you don't want them to seem, I don't know, you don't want them to think that you're weird or something, right? But realistically speaking, everyone is busy living their own life. Nobody has time to judge you. Nobody really cares about you because you're a stranger. So do your work, do as you want. And when I started my charity, I had a website, and honestly, the website was a little ugly because I wasn't used to designing websites, right? Sometimes I would get like comments on my website from strangers, from anonymous people. I knew they were my classmates, and they would tease me. They would be like, this is so funny. Why are you doing this? Something like that, right? And that was so embarrassing because I would see them in the hallway and they would make fun of me sometimes. I know they didn't mean to be mean, but you know, if I actually listened to them, then I wouldn't have been able to live true to myself. So that's kind of what I'm trying to tell you. Nobody cares about what you do. Just do it. Just do it. When you become successful, then people might be like, oh, wow, super cool. But when you're not successful, you know, that stuff might hurt. Don't let it hurt you. Second thing, it depends. I think that's something I've learned too. A lot of things when you're younger, you take extreme, like black and white. Realistically, there's so many complicated things in someone's life. There's so many different angles to a situation. Just know what you want and know who you are and try to be more flexible in that way. That's something important. Another thing, time compounds. When I was younger, for example, I noticed that the small things I did applied to bigger steps. For example, going into university, 200 people were competing for executive positions for like school clubs, which is ridiculous to me, by the way, but pre-meds are desperate, okay? They're desperate. And what I noticed was all the work that I've done in grade 12, such as grinding on Stream, the charity, that really translated monumentally because a lot of those achievements I did early on was able to pull me way ahead of the competition. I had like 10 executive positions. In the end, I quit a bunch of them because I didn't even like them. But You know what I mean? I was so much more forward because I did so much when I was younger. And a lot of these younger achievements actually really just add up a lot more time than you think. Um, but then again, I do want to say all the things I tell you, you have to take with discretion. For example, who cares? Don't take it way too literally because obviously you could still have mistakes and they have lasting consequences. I speak from experience because I did have some mistakes, obviously. And sometimes when I had that who care mentality, it's a little hard to moderate sometimes. And obviously, I got the hard end of that. But being able to practice discretion, right? And then it depends also sometimes it doesn't depend. Sometimes it is what it is. Maybe someone is ignoring you, not because oh life gets busy, but because they just don't really care about you, something like that. That sounds horrible, but sometimes it doesn't depend. Sometimes it is what it is. Right? And then finally, I struggle the most with the third one, is sometimes I feel guilty enjoying my time because, as you guys can see, a lot of my fun free time is spent traveling or doing some productive thing. So I feel guilty when I actually take that time to watch Netflix or something, right? So all of these perspectives are very helpful and very productive, but you have to take them in moderation. So that's essentially it for my unique perspectives and all the things that I would love to share with you. And I'd be really open to any questions that you might have.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Joy. That was very eye-opening, actually. And I'm from my just personally from my own perspective. If I was still like in high school or undergrad, or even now, like all of the advice you've given, really, I think I would have loved that. Might have given me more perspective on how to like go through it. And yeah, being proactive is not easy. So having that kind of advice there helps you navigate yourself and how you can kind of pursue whatever it is that you're trying to do. So thank you for that. It was wonderful. We do have some questions just from my end. We're gonna enter into like an interview. I'm just gonna try and put my slides back up. So give me a brief moment. Let's see where that is. Oh, you know what? Right there. Yeah, I think your screen is still being shared right now, maybe.
Ooh, sorry about that.
There you go. No problem. Just see if I can get our thing back on. Bear with me. Okay. I think everyone, do you see the slide, Joy?
You're good.
Okay, just to interview there. Let me just pull up our questions. So awesome. So the first question we had, I think that might really kind of help us, is what are some positive and negative experiences you had as a youth leader?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I kind of mentioned it before, but I think the first most embarrassing thing, most hard thing was the embarrassment because, you know, obviously you're inexperienced, you make a lot of cringy mistakes. And the worst part is that your peers can be really mean. I think that's the hard part. But I think a lot of things I've learned was I met a lot of cool people. And because of those people, they have their own experiences and value that they bring to the table. So I learned a lot from them. And as I did more of these things, I think a lot of it actually built my own self-esteem. And I also had a lot more control over my own life. So I think there's also that. It's definitely like a give or take. But honestly, the embarrassment, the peer pressure, the being tired, these are all things that I think are very temporary. So honestly, as a consequence, I don't think they're as heavy as the gigantic benefits that you would reap.
Which leads me to my next question. How would you sustain or maintain the positive outcomes as a youth leader?
Yeah, I think honestly, that's the biggest thing so many people struggle with, because obviously now that I'm in like fourth year and I talk to so many people who are applying to med schools and all that, if you look at their CVs and resumes, a lot of them stop doing a lot of those extracurriculars during times of like exams, honestly, myself included. But I think the most important is to lean on people, really rely on other people to help you, because life can get tough, But when you're doing it alone, it's even worse because you gradually, lose motivation. You're doing so many other things. What you really need is a team, a really strong team to get you through everything. And I think you always have to look past that discouragement and the hardships, because those things, again, feel so real. They feel so discouraging, and they really bring you down really hard. But at the end of the day, take a few days to heal and you're back on your feet again, and you have to just keep going forward. I think that's what it is. So have a bigger team to really support your work, but also don't take discouragements too hard or too personally. And again, that's easier said than done, especially in the beginning. That's the hardest part, but you have to have faith that it will be better, and it will.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Very inspiring. For the third question, how do you approach challenges as a youth leader, and specifically when do you problem solve?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think one thing I actually kind of regret in my younger days is trying to do everything myself, because I could have totally just asked people who are older than me. I could have asked mentors, or like even Eddie. Oh my God, that's a great example. Back then, I met Eddie and I became really close with him. So in case some of you guys don't know, he is someone at OneHub, and we had like a partnership going on, and it was great. But even back then, I wish I was even more outgoing and I asked him more questions about managing people and etc. So talking to mentors, really using your resources, I think that's a huge thing that is very much undermined in people. And it kind of goes back to the thing about vulnerability. Are you willing to be vulnerable enough to show that you need help? And I think that's something that I struggled with, and honestly I still kind of do. But it's something that I think is really important, and then eventually obviously you get better. But I think if you constantly put yourself in different experiences, you'll have to constantly navigate through these awkward places, and eventually it'll become hardwired in you, and it's easier for you to combat every problem, because you realize that there's just so many problems out there, and it's really not the end of the world if you run across something.
Yeah, definitely. So then with that, do you have any recommendations for youth that you would like to give?
Yeah, I say, okay, so stepwise, first is consult someone wiser if you can. But at the same time, don't become reliant. Try to fix things on your own if you have time, and try not to give yourself too many wiggle room to get out of the position, because it's through the hardships that will force you to become a better person. So if you constantly escape that, you don't give yourself the chance to grow. So force yourself to be in weird positions sometimes. And then, if you're really feeling difficulty, just try to reach out, try to constantly be in that position, vice versa. That's all it takes, really.
Mm-hmm. So for those members of the audience that are, kind of in the most earliest phases of kind of deciding on whether or not they should become a youth leader, what would you recommend them? Or
that's
what
a great
advice would you give them to open the doors?
Yes, that's a great question. Small steps, I think, is the best thing to do. Small steps. And also get someone who's who hypes you up. Get someone who hypes you up. So I would say, if you feel like you can't even, for example, it depends. There's different comfort levels. If you feel like you're someone who struggles to even ask waiters for a glass of water, try asking the waiter for a glass of water. That's your first step. If that's even hard, maybe get a friend sitting next to you, and then afterwards tell them to force you to. It's always the small steps. They sound dramatic, but small steps will get you forward. And think about when you've actually taken those steps and succeeded, and that will really just push you forward. Obviously, though, it's always the beginning that's the hardest, but you have to just do it sometimes.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. It's those small steps help you kind of get through the door, and then with each successive one, you gain more confidence, and then
exactly.
Eventually, you kind of feel like what was so anxiety
Exactly.
isn't that much.
Totally.